I'm here with Scarlett McLellan, who used to live in Hong Kong and attended... do you want to tell us exactly what years were you living in Hong Kong for and your experiences attending protests?
Yeah, okay, so I lived in Hong Kong from 2006 through to 2012, so I was little, but I had a lot of family friends and a lot of family kind of extensions still living in Hong Kong, so I would go back quite periodically up until COVID, and I went back literally at the dead end, so December 2019, and I protested in quite a famous protest on New Year's Day, first day of 2020, which was actually 2 days before COVID came into Hong Kong, which was kind of crazy. That was reportedly, depending on who you ask, whether it's the police or the government or the kind of protesting body, reportedly over 1 million people were in this one street in Hong Kong. So that was lit experience, pro-democracy protest against the CCP.
Awesome. So either from 2006 to 2012 or one of the times that you went back after that, can you describe any memories of noticing or being affected by state surveillance in Hong Kong?
I think the notice was in the difference. So growing up in 06 to 12, specifically pre-GFC, it's all very I don't know, it's like a global hub, so there's not any surveillance and everyone's kind of just having a lovely time. And even when I was little, it was really, really free place. It was still very influenced by the fact that, I don't know, English democracy was still very, very present. And then going back, comparatively, walking around the MTR station for the first time in my life, and where there would usually have been one dodgy 50-year-old security guard, there was at least, I would say, upwards of 20 fully armed riot police, on any given random morning. You're just trying to get on the tram to uni or school to go to the central, and there's just at every MTR station full on riot police. And it was just oh, gag, okay, go off. It was very, very present, and everyone was suddenly very, very quiet in public spaces, which was very disconcerting for what was previously a very loud place.
So there was an increase in police or authority presence on the streets. And
online as well.
How so online?
So it's a lot of the protest was all these online what is the word again? Anyway, you go online, you sign a thing that says protest bills. Anyway, there's a lot of that, but a lot of people were suddenly got really scared to put their names on things. So there was this whole rise in anonymous protest culture. The whole digital movement around it became really, really, people got really, really scared of being tracked. A lot of people started getting second phones that they'd bring with them to work, especially if they had to go across the border to Sheners, which a lot of people did. So they'd have a home phone or a phone for organizing protest activities. They'd have a work phone they bring with them across the border.
Awesome. So do you feel as though, actually, more relevant to what you were just saying, do you feel like there were moments either in the protests or just living in Hong Kong where you consciously, or visiting Hong Kong, where you consciously altered digital habits to avoid surveillance? So that could be anything from using VPNs to, like you said, maybe getting a second phone or encrypted messaging apps, those types of things.
So I took a lot of photos, a lot of protest stuff. Not from when I was actually there, but from a lot of the neighborhood where I was staying in is a neighborhood which, a lot of the protests went down in quite famously. So it was kind of a lot of not graffiti necessarily, but there was a lot of messaging around, and there was kind of a lot of protest material. I took a lot of photos of that. And then I was meant to cross the border as part of my trip at one point, and my mom and I had a desperate discussion whether or not to delete stuff. We all ended up deleting a whole bunch of stuff off our phones, heading to the airport, same thing, all that stuff. Because there's a lot of a culture of having to hand your phone in to get searched. That started happening a lot more often. It's pretty common in mainland China, but it didn't really used to happen in Hong Kong. And then, so I knew a lot of people who whatever you kept that was associated with you, everyone started being very, very mindful, I would say. Everyone deleted things, or you got a second phone. I had an incident where I didn't delete things, and then I got stuck in a migration office in a train station in Shenzhen, and I was there for 3 hours, and they didn't take my phone in the end, but they took everyone else's around us, and I was like, I'm gonna get.
So do you think that the surveillance or surveillance on protests or just people's day-to-day lives made people safer, or do you think it kind of stepped over that line?
Safer? Absolutely not safer. No, not safer. People were terrified. Everyone was scared shitless. Because I think that the thing that is the surveillance wasn't about like public safety, because a lot of the protests weren't like, I mean, obviously like any kind of like big violent gathering is like dangerous to the public, but it wasn't that kind of movement, and a lot of the people were like sympathetic towards that cause. So the surveillance wasn't like to protect the people really, it was to prevent and to punish. So yeah, I would say people were very, very aware of the surveillance.
Right, so does that mean that people were meaningfully informed, or were they kind of in the dark about the extent to which Hong Kong authorities were surveilling them, either whether that be online or in person in the street?
I think in the dark in the sense that it wasn't exactly like, it wasn't publicly disclosed whatsoever, but they knew, like, that, because a lot of people understand how, like, mainland China works, and so when those kind of surveillance measures that are really common and, like, are well-known in mainland China kind of started stretching into Hong Kong, everyone, like, you know, like, word of mouth, like, cultural, everyone kind of starts to understand what's going on. But no, it wasn't, like, publicly disclosed.
So was it kind of just assuming the worst? Like, they could take our phones, they could go through it all, they could...
Well, it was more like experiences that you knew people that had happened to. So, like, a lot of people would have had friends that had been searched, or, like, I don't know, it's quite, there was a lot of, like, scare culture, like, a lot of people got arrested for the protests, but also there were, like, people who, like, low-key, like, disappeared. And so everyone was quite, like, there was a lot of, like, I would say just, like, fear and people just taking, like, best measures. But it wasn't without basis, if that makes sense. Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. First off, do you, for this question, do you see Hong Kong as a democracy? Do you think it was and it's changed? How do you see Hong Kong as a state currently?
I don't know if it was a democracy. I mean, it was a democracy in, like, the sense that, like, it was ruled over by the British, and it was really liberal and, like, prosperous. There was a lot of happiness, and obviously there's still, like, downsides, because at the end of the day, like it was colonization, but I don't know, it was a bit of a different context. Now it's not in any sense. Yeah. Now it's a very different place, and I would say a much sadder place. And there is much less freedom generally, and I think that the illusions of democracy that remain are like a low-key a farce. Okay, so we wouldn't define Hong Kong as a democratic country currently. Well, it's an SAR. Yeah. So, meaning, sorry. No, you're right. So now, well, where people used to, like, so if you used to go and, like, look at a country list if you were buying something online, Hong Kong usually used to get listed as its own country. Yeah. Which wasn't technically correct. But after the Chinese came back in, so Hong Kong is technically an SAR, which is a special administrative region of China. It's effectively a state. And suddenly SAR became prevalent on everything, and Hong Kong got taken off all of those country lists, and so it's like it's in so many ways its identity has just, like, completely changed. Yeah, and become a part of a complete subsidiary of China. 100%. Okay, so looking at more democratic countries like Australia, do you see any warning signs of similar surveillance trends emerging? Probably not in the same context, but is there any comparison you can draw from experiences in Hong Kong to current day Australia in terms of monitoring? And is there anything that people should be either aware of or wary of? And it's fine if the answer is no. No, I think it's just so different, because the things that your government are trying to monitor you for, I would say, like, this might be, like, quite an altruistic view of the Australian government, but I would say that what the purpose for surveillance is, like, quite different. And also, the freedoms that exist in Australia do not, like, allow for that level of surveillance to happen. It doesn't allow for that level of all of the extreme, like, consequences to happen. We have a thriving free press. Like, you don't have the same. It's just a whole different context. I would say things like, you know, I think there's nothing that is specific to, like, when it comes to, like, the increases in surveillance, I feel like it's more of, like, a global thing than something that's specific to Australia. I feel like being aware of social media is something that, like, sounds really silly, but, like, at the end of the day, I think the most increasing surveillance is, like, the things that you post online, to be honest. I feel like there's more of a global increase in surveillance that I don't really see that much of an increase here. And what I would see here, I would say would be more targeted towards safety.
Right.
In my
so
perception.
if you could like either say something or chat to either a surveillance firm exec or a policymaker in Australia, I will stick with Australia for now. What do you think you'd either say or ask them that you're unclear on, based on your experiences in Hong Kong?
I don't know. I feel like I think the interesting thing as, like, a member of the public, of any public, is, like, you never really understand the extent to which you can be surveilled, right? Like, you never really understand the extent to which some, like you in your room on your phone, like, the extent to which they can just gather and know about you.
Why do you think that a company could ever maybe publicly say, like, we do this, this, and this?
No, I don't think so.
So you think that people would always, even if a company has to the fullest extent kind of declared what they do online, how they surveil people, do you think that people will always fear that they are doing more than that?
I think the difference between a company and a government is quite a different concern.
Okay.
I feel that a company's, like, I don't think you really, I think you can trust those two things for different things. I think you can distrust them for different things. I think a company is a lot more liable than a government. I also think that their agendas are a little bit more blatant sometimes. I don't know. I feel like the whole thing is just a bit shrouded in mystery.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I think that you can only trust what they declare so much as you can throw them. And I think the larger the company, the more that is. And I think when it comes to a government, I think you have no idea. I think you will never have any idea. I think what they declare is potentially for better, potentially for worse, what you should think, and not necessarily what there is to know. And I stand by that. Because, and maybe that was influenced by Hong Kong, because there was a lot going on there that, you know, no one will ever report or know, or, I feel that the government will never tell you exactly what they're doing, and nor should they.
Okay. Last question, then we can go into... Do you think that it's right that a lot of the time governments or authorities will link up with private companies who are in the surveillance sector in an attempt to kind of shift responsibility of any deal that they come up with, any technology that they fund, any technology that they implement, either through their police, military, or otherwise? Plausible deniability. Saying, like, when the government's questioned on it, kind of shifting those questions towards the private company. When the private company is asked about it, they're saying, no, we have a contract with the government. Do you think that that's a strategy that successfully kind of muddies the ethics around this whole issue about who is actually accountable?
I think, like, I don't know. I think it's quite interesting. I would say that, like, obviously, I'm not necessarily the most educated person to make an opinion on that. But what I would think is that a lot of the time, these things might be funded out of, like, not just, like, almost out of, not out of interest, but, like, out of the possibility. I don't know. Like, just because they're funding something doesn't mean that they've immediately incorporated it, like, into their surveillance, like, into their, like, actual, like, use. As a government, I'm saying. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean... But it's kind of more like, I don't know, you're sort of paying them to, like, explore the possibility of, like, creating a new technology or a new way to incorporate something. I don't know. I think muddying the ethics, I don't know. I think all of this is just about ambiguous, to be honest. Like, muddying the ethics in what sense, though? Like, of surveillance, of like surveilling people, or
As
the
in,
fact
who
that
is accountable for those decisions? Is it the private company or the government?
Well, government's funding, so so without that support, that doesn't exist. I mean, potentially, because you never know, like, what the other option is. But
so you feel that private companies who are acting on government funding but acting of their own accord in those situations, governments are still accountable
Completely.
for what those companies do.
Completely and utterly.
Got it.
Of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, because at the end of the day, like who's going to put it into practical use? Ultimately, if it all gets developed, it's probably the government in some way, sense, or shape or form, because they have the greatest access. I don't know.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much, Scarlett McLellan. This has been awesome.